Hey, it's hammer time. Today on Hammer Time, we have a special episode. We have a guru of trade, one of the great voices of keeping trade going in the United States of America, Linda Dempsey from NAM. Linda, thank you so much for being on the show.
Happy to be here with y'all.
Just wanted to get your sense. I mean, you have been leading the push for trade, and I'd like to specifically start with the U.S.-Mexico-Canada agreement. What are your thoughts of how is this likely to move forward?
Sure thing. Well, look, trade and the U.S.-Mexico-Canada relationship are really very important for our manufacturers, right? These are our customers around the world, and Canada and Mexico purchase more manufactured goods than any other country, in fact, than the next 10 countries combined. So keeping a strong North American commercial environment has been priority one for all of us here at the NAM. And we're happy to see this agreement moving forward. It's now been signed. If we can restore business certainty to the North American commercial marketplace, we should take that opportunity and do so as quickly as possible.
Linda, you're one of the reasons that this agreement is even at this point. I mean, the truth is not everyone knows this, but you helped save this agreement during some very, very dark times. And now here we are, the agreement's been signed. Could you maybe now talk through sort of the positives, the negatives, and some of the other aspects of this agreement? How should we be thinking about this new agreement from the business community standpoint?
Sure. I think the thing that we're hearing from our manufacturers, small and large, is first and foremost, we're keeping duty-free treatment in North America. That's vital. Just the level of commerce that goes through to the borders every single day is enormous, and trying to keep those taxes off, the cost down, is really important. The other aspect I think we keep hearing from is there's some really new advanced provisions in here to protect intellectual property, the lifeblood of manufacturers, whether you're talking about patents, whether you're talking about copyrights or trade secrets, industrial designs, all of that. This agreement now has state-of-the-art, best-in-class provisions, and that's good for all manufacturers across the board.
Could I just ask, I mean, we're talking, is the language strong enough that this might be template language for future trade agreements as well?
Absolutely. I think all of our manufacturers are looking at this and saying, this is the type of intellectual property protection, enforcement type provisions that we want in markets around the world. And so I think there'll be somewhat of a push to use this language, hopefully going forward in some of the new negotiations the administration is talking about, particularly with Japan, the UK, the European Union, but there's a lot of other countries out there, particularly developing countries, where we have these very high intellectual property challenges. And so having this as the new template for the United States for our manufacturers is absolutely critical.
How about digital goods?
That's where I was going next. The digital economy is important to all industries, to all consumers, but for manufacturers, we make it, we use it in our factories to produce things, and the goods we're producing are increasingly digitally enhanced, right? Our farmers can now look at the dashboard on their tractor to figure out what that crop yield is. So the digital economy is absolutely critical, and just like on intellectual property, Glenn, the provisions in this agreement, best in class, the best we've seen, really positive to enhance the flow of the data that needs to move forward, includes disciplines to prevent barriers from cropping up on the digital economy. And so really, I think, very strong provisions. Again, we'd like to see these replicated in other agreements going forward.
The de minimis standards. As a border state, this was a pretty big deal for us. Congressman Schweikert from Arizona, this was one of his major issues. He serves on the Powerful Ways and Means Committee. How might that affect trade flows between Mexico and Canada?
Right. So the United States has a fairly large de minimis because we understand that enhancing the flow of imports, actually, as long as they're fairly traded, those imports are really good to our manufacturing competitiveness. They're great for our consumers as well. And so we in industry, along with the folks like Congressman Schweikert, work to get the de minimis levels up in Canada and Mexico, where both are relatively low. In both cases, the two countries agreed to double their de minimis, which is great. but still not as high as we would like. So we're going to see some new, I think, trade flows as a result of that, but we're going to continue working with both countries to find ways to explain to them why it's good for their economies as well as our economy to heighten those standards going forward. But overall, I think it's a positive that we're happy to talk about.
Arizona's auto sector is increasing. We have a major manufacturer that's coming in to manufacture an electric car in Pinal County, in large part because of the supply chain in Hermosillo, Mexico. Right. I know that the rules of origin and wage standards were a big part of this agreement. Can you maybe walk us through how the new trade agreement deals with both issues?
Right. So there was a desire by this administration to enhance production in North America, requiring more content for an automobile to come from North America. And so the biggest change is moving the level of content upwards. And then there's also new provisions requiring that at least part of that content is produced in higher wage factories, certainly in ways that advantage U.S. and Canadian production, but also put pressure on Mexico to increase their wage rates of their facilities as well. There's other provisions in terms of steel, aluminum purchases in North America. Frankly, I think there's already a lot of usage of U.S. steel and aluminum and in North America in our cars, but this heightens that and makes it more explicit. There's going to be some transition time. I think we're all aware of that. The automakers are still looking at these rules, figuring out exactly how this is going to work for different production models. There's some years of transition before any of these rules are implemented going forward. They're going to have to work with their part suppliers. And so I think, we'll see some changes on this. Not the counter, but another facet of this agreement, when I think about that cross-border supply chain that you talked about with Arizona and Mexico, and we certainly have it with Canada, is there was this movement to modernize the rules, the customs rules, the border rules for both Canada and Mexico and the United States, bring them into the 21st century, yes, modernize them so goods can move more quickly. And so I think that will also advantage this production model. And so we'll just have to see how this all works out.
The reducing friction and the modernizing of some of those customs rules, is that part of the new agreement, or is that something that would likely to take place on the side to make it easier for goods?
It's already part of the new agreement that we've seen, and so that's a big positive, I think. Much more getting rid of that old, have to renew your annual certificate of origin every year, relying much more on the business documents that our companies are already producing every day to move it forward, moving more towards electronic submission of data, those types of items that are going to reduce that friction.
If the agreement does not get done in a lame duck Congress, we have a change in leadership in the House. How does that affect congressional action, in your view?
I think it affects what we in the business community are doing. And what we all need to be doing right now is educating our workforces, educating our local policymakers. I know you all are doing that already, and every day it's best in class coming from you, Glenn. But also our members of Congress, our senators, they need to understand what's at stake. They need to understand that it's critical that we have a strong North American commercial environment, that this agreement is going to help us retain and move that forward in a number of ways that we've already discussed. But that needs to start now, and I think if everyone is doing their job and explaining what this means, I'm very hopeful that we're going to get this done either in a lame duck or as early as possible next year.
Well, I appreciate your personal leadership and holding very regular calls with people across the country from chambers and other interested companies and groups who are interested in NAFTA. That to me has been best in class, and that has given us the information we've needed to communicate to our congressional delegations.
Well, we're going to keep that up, and we look forward to working with you and your members and our members to move this across the finish line as soon as we can.
My final question is how all of this plays in with what's going on with China right now. I mean, to me, this makes it even more urgent to get this deal through either this Congress or the next Congress?
Look, the administration has taken on China in a very big way. Yes, it's a big market for our manufacturers, but it's also the source of a lot of the market distortions and unfair trade actions. And so we really want to see that pressure continue and get us to new negotiations with China. But you're exactly right. We need to move forward this USMCA, get that off the plate, secure the competitiveness of the North American marketplace, and that will put us in a much stronger position when it comes to dealing with China.
Okay, my truly final question. You have the administration now that's opening up these potential agreements and has helped, there's some positive things going on with Korea, with Japan. How should we be thinking, and the EU, how should we be thinking about where we are at this point in time with trade? Are we moving overall in the right direction, in your view, in terms of more free, fair, and...
Look, I think we are really happy to see new negotiations starting for manufacturers. We only have 5% of the world's consumers in our market. We are much more productive than that. We need better access to these foreign countries around the world. And so having these new trade agreements is absolutely the right thing to do. Trying to get China to the table to itself negotiate a new trade agreement, I think, is the other thing we very much want to see moving forward, because that's the right approach to bring China under a new set of rules. Just like we modernized the rules with Canada and Mexico, we need to modernize those rules with China.
Linda, I'm just grateful for your work and for you involving us in your important work.
Well, thank you, and we look forward to keeping that partnership going.